Okay, let's talk about the second normal form. A relation is in the second normal form if and only if, first, it is already in the first normal form, and secondly, every non-key attribute is functionally dependent on the primary key. What in the world does that mean? So basically, a functional dependency is when the value of one attribute determines the value of another attribute. So if we're looking at the bad table example, and here our employee table, if I said, hey, tell me what department our employee with the last name Smith is in, you'd look at this table and go, well, if you're talking about John Smith, they're in finance. If they're talking about Nancy Smith, they're in human resources. So I don't know. The only way we really are going to be able to give you that information is if we're using the employee ID number instead, right? Our primary key. So that is one. So having that primary key in place is kind of step one in it. And then it's looking at the rest of the table and going, okay, so does department head have anything to do with the employee ID? I know that we want to know that Gromit Wallace is in research and their skip level boss is Jackson. But we're not going to call up the information about the department head. Like, we don't want that to be connected to this specific employee. We want these tables separate. So that's exactly what we need to do in order to normalize to the second form, is making sure that each of our tables only contain the relevant data for that particular primary key. So the employee primary key should only have employee data in it. The department table with a department ID should only have department data in it. And then you connect those together with a one-to-many relationship in this case. Okay, so at this stage, you'd be reviewing your entities to make sure that all of the information in your tables are relevant to whatever your primary key is, basically. Let's look at a second example just to make sure we got it. And this one's a little more complex. So again, we have an employee project table in this case. So here we've got the employee ID numbers and names and titles and the salaries, and then what project they work on, and all sorts of information about the projects. So just looking at the names, and you can see that there's multiple IDs in here. It should be kind of obvious that these should be two different tables, right? We have our employee data, and then we have our project data, and they don't have anything to do with each other. Like, an employee works on a project and projects have employees, but the budget doesn't have any, and the duration doesn't have anything to do with who's actually assigned to the project and vice versa. So in this case, we're actually in a many-to-many relationship. So we created our associative entity, our sign table. Also another name for this case is a joining table. So this table is joining together our employee and our project tables to connect this many-to-many relationship. So you can see fairly easily here how everything breaks down. And so again, not a new concept, but just a kind of a checklist of like, yes, I've taken care of all my multi-valued attributes. Yes, I've taken a composite attributes and broke them out appropriately. Yes, I have a primary key. Yes, they're not null. Yes, all of the attributes in my table is actually dependent on the primary key.